Right. Hello, greetings. It's Dr. Tom Stafford, and I'm here for my weekly talk, and I hope you're going to enjoy this. I thought I'd do something a bit different today. I'm going to be talking and showing a film show about some of the places I visited on piecework. And I want to start, I'm talking just coming up to the autumn equinox here. Today's the 19th of September. So, I hope you have a great autumn equinox. It's the time of balance, justice, truth, which is, of course, what we should all be striving for. It's what I, as a Druid and a Christian and a Sufi, always strive for. I've just been involved in a conference this weekend on the 18th and 19th of September, organised by Rotary International, which is a really good international body. It was set up in Chicago in 1905 by a guy called Frank Harris, and he was just a kind of American, self-taught do-gooder. He was a Christian, and his colleague Gustav Lohr, who lived from 1864 to 1918, was a German-American Freemason and a Christian, and they both wanted to do what they could for society. So they set this thing up, Rotary, which is based on, loosely, the idea of the round table, the Arthurian idea that everyone who sits around the round table is equal. We have at Stonehenge, the Stonehenge round table, which myself and others have been involved with for a long time with English heritage. And we try to get, sorted the problems of access to Stonehenge at sacred times by the pagan and Druid community. It's ongoing work, that. But Rotary now flourish in, 100 and something countries, and they have members in chapters that meet in their own towns. So there's one in Torquay, one in Bristol, one in London. Many chapters throughout the Western world, but also India, and all over the British Commonwealth, all over the European Union. Interesting people, and one of their big projects is peace. There's many members, over 1 million members worldwide, and they're active particularly on peace. It's one of their big issues. They sponsor peace fellowships, where they actually pay students to go through a master's program in peace studies at, I think there's 9 selected universities worldwide. And so they're educating a whole bunch of future generational peace leaders, which is superb. And they're giving to concrete charitable projects doing peace building in countries around the world, like Nigeria, like India, like wherever. Thailand has got a strong Rotary presence as well. So good luck to them all. And I was invited to give a talk as a resource person on peace studies, my work over the last 30 years. And it was wonderful meeting everyone. They're a great bunch of people. And it was organised by the Rotary Club of Pune in India. So well done to them. And we heard from the International Rotary President, who's the head of the whole thing. He is actually based in India, but he travels around the world a lot. Fascinating man, Mr. Mehta. I also want to say this week, Terry Dobney has been buried. He was, cremated. He was a great friend of mine, a Druid elder, and over 100 bikers turned out for his funeral going past Avebury. Long live Terry. Gone to the Summerlands. He came to several of my Truth and Reconciliation Commission meetings for Stonehenge, even for the UK and Ireland. He was always there, had a long white beard, always sensible, making, moderate kind of noises. And he was, an active member of the Council of British Druid Orders, which I also am a peace officer for. So bless him, Terry. Thank you very much for all your service over the years. And you've left behind lots of Druids eager to, carry on the work in the Avebury context. I also want to mention the fact that I finally finished my commentary on the Quran, which is an epic work. I mentioned this to the Rotary talk, and I mean, I can't believe it really, time flies, but I did start this 10 years ago when I first moved to the Castle of the Muses in Scotland, in Argyll. I've been a lecturer in Islamic studies, I've taught Islamic history both at university, at the Muslim College and Oxford and London universities, and then in schools throughout the UK. When I was head of RE, I'd often give talk. I mean, it's part of the curriculum, you have to learn about Islam. And I've always tried to do it in depth. I've had many Islamic friends and students. I am a Sufi myself. I've met many Sufi elders over the years. And I think Islam is an amazing key to peace. If there's 1 billion Muslims on the planet, that's like 1/7 of us all. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. There are Sunnis, Shias, Sufis, Ismailis, Druze, and Alawites. And then they all have subdivisions, and there are different Sufi orders, there are different Sunni groups, they follow different legal traditions. There are Shias in Iran, but also scattered around elsewhere. There are Ismailis. I mean, I've studied them all, and they're all really interesting. And if you look at their history, it's fascinating. I attend the Harvard University program on Shia studies. I'm monitoring closely what's going on in Afghanistan. You know, we need a peace conversation inside Islam, inside the 1 billion people in Islam. We need a peace conversation for the people of Iraq, Syria, Libya. I think the West has totally got it wrong by intervening in these so-called civil wars. I mean, the West has often been helping foment them. And what we should have been doing is doing what Emerson and Thoreau would have done, which is send philosophers and educators to discuss with them. A colleague of mine runs a university in Iran for interfaith dialogue, and they publish a journal which they've just published an article on Emerson's knowledge of Islam. Apparently he'd read Hafiz and Rumi, and you know, he loved Islam. I mean, I know that, scholars know this, so did Goethe. In my commentary on the Quran I've just finished, I've gone into all this in detail. I mean, Goethe was someone who was inspired by Hafiz to write a whole bunch of poems, the East-West Divan. And Thomas Carlyle was another. He was a friend of Emerson and a great admirer of Goethe. He never met Goethe, but Carlyle was a great fan and translated Goethe into English for the first time, a great Scottish intellectual in London, lived in Chelsea, and he thought that the West shouldn't be warring with Islam, but should be sitting and studying along with, and that German philosophy in the form of, Kant and Hegel and Goethe could open the secrets to a universal approach to peace that is transcendental to any one religious revelation, but inclusive of them all. So Carlyle loved Christianity as well as Islam, and he wrote sympathetically about Muhammad, one of the first English or British scholars to do so. He also set up the London Library, where I spent many happy hours studying, so well done, Carlyle. So anyway, long and the short of it, I've just finished a 10-year project, I can't believe it, time flies, a commentary on the Quran, and it's intended for the 1 billion people on the planet who identify with Islam. I want them to listen to my commentary, and that will take them even deeper into their appreciation and understanding of their holy book, of our holy book, because I maintain this belongs to all humanity. This work is a universal heritage for mankind. It doesn't just belong to Muslims, whatever you think that means. Let me explain what a Muslim is. What is a Muslim? Are you a Muslim? My students used to say. Well, I would love to be, because a Muslim is someone who's surrendered their ego to God. Now, most of the wars, conflicts, whether on the micro or macro level of the planet, are about ego. You've noticed that, I've noticed that. Quarrels in your friendship circles, your family group, in your religious circles, whatever they are, they're usually about ego. It's two strong personalities that won't, neither of which will back down, and that both insist, I'm right, I'm right. Well, it's the I that's the problem there, as Buddha pointed out. If you take the I out of that sentence, then we're all right. We're all right, actually. The thing is to articulate and find a common ground of rightness for everybody in every conflict. In the Yemen, who's right? The Shiiah, the Sunni? Well, I'm right. No, we're all right. We just have different parts of the jigsaw puzzle. It's the old story of the Hindu sages touching an elephant. They're all blind. The one touching the trunk thinks it's this shape, the other one thinks it's the shape of the tail, and so on. We all know that metaphor. Well, that's, even within Islam, people can grab different parts of the thing and say, no, I identify with that. The thing is it's a constant struggle. It's an inner jihad the whole time to surrender our ego and transcend it. And that was Muhammad's stroke of genius, his insight into how we can solve conflict and war. And it's, it's an ongoing lesson we all need to learn. And that's the secret. Anyway, in the Quran commentary I've just finished, I've tried to explain it psychologically. I've done a transpersonal psychological commentary on the Quran using my many years of study into transpersonal history, using Jung, Saggioli, Maslow, Ken Wilber, all the great transpersonal thinkers of our time who've upgraded the knowledge of the soul in a scientific way, in a way that wasn't available to Muhammad. Muhammad was a prophetic practitioner who downloaded from divine intelligence wisdom, which came to him by inspiration, and he says that, this is coming to me by divine inspiration. But it came from what I call the divine intelligence, the divine mind, to use Thoreau or Emerson's or Hegel's language, or the language of the Discovery Institute. And the point is that no one has a monopoly on access to the divine intelligence. We're all its children. We're all put here on the planet to do our best to uphold the moral laws, to uphold Dharma, as Krishna taught Arjuna in the middle of the Mahabharata battle when the frame froze and they did their God talk. The Quran is as serious a text as obviously the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible. They're all trying to do the same thing, which is to find out how the ego can be transcended. Buddha gave a whole load of instructions on that. He was a master of ego transcendence. His whole system of enlightenmentism or divine intellectism, which is what Buddhism means, is about how to transcend the ego, because it causes pain and suffering to yourself and to others. If you act from ego, you just end up with a constant disappointment, because you never get what you want, you never grasp enough to satisfy your greed, and you never can give enough to satisfy other people's greed. Our duty on this planet is to uphold Dharma, truth, which is where the word druid comes from. A Dharma seer is the technical interpretation of that phrase. So anyway, the Quran is a fantastic book, and it's one of the most recent of the prophetic outpourings, and I've explained it all in detail for people of this era, this time, because each generation has to reinterpret the Holy Scriptures, and I've sort of articulated what I think Emerson and Carlyle and Goethe and Hegel would have said had they done a commentary on the Quran. They didn't live long enough or have time, and they maybe didn't realise its importance. They thought Islam was sort of outmoded, we'd all transcended it. No, there's still 1 billion Muslims on the planet, and they're holding on to their sacred book extremely stubbornly, and they've just fought off in Afghanistan the collective might of the Soviet Union and the collective might of NATO and the USA. Because there's something in the Quran that is deeper and stronger than any battle tanks or jet planes. It's called Dharma, it's called truth, it's the wisdom of the divine intelligence. So listen to my commentary. It's on my Global Green University website, which you should be able to easily access. Just Global Green University, and it comes up. So I completed it yesterday, I can't believe it, 18th of September 2021, should live in the annals of Islamic studies and comparative religion. I've done this commentary for, not just for Muslims, so-called, but for everyone on the planet that's trying to educate and transform their ego into being a vehicle for divine gnosis and divine knowledge. That includes all Christians by definition, and Christ is revered in the Quran. He's mentioned hundreds of times, reverentially. Muhammad actually studied with Gnostic Christians and Nestorians who taught him a lot of what he knew. We know the names of some of them. His first and most important wife, Khadija, who he studied with for 15 years in a wisdom affair, like a to-die-for power couple, you could call them, was a Gnostic Christian with her cousin Waraka. And they actually educated Muhammad in these secret paths. And yeah, so I've gone into all this, drawing on sort of advanced contemporary scholarship and sort of intuitive hermeneutics based on my transpersonal history, concepts which were put into my PhD and subsequent writings. Yeah, and I'm very happy to have done this for the planet. And I hope this work will live on, in coming generations. I'd love it to be translated into Arabic, into Turkish, into Persian, into Pashto, into all the languages in the Middle East, into Hebrew. This commentary has a strong Kabbalistic component, and I'm arguing, I believe correctly, that Muhammad was inspired and influenced by Kabbalistic teachers. That I've explained the letters at the front of some of the surahs according to that Kabbalistic teaching. For the first time, no other commentator has ever done this. I don't know why it should be me. I suppose it's because I'm versed in both Western and Eastern thought, because I live in an era when we are global thinkers and therefore have access to things like the Kabbalah. In the old days, people didn't know about this stuff. I made it my business for 30, 40 years of intensive study to go and ferret it out. And I've come up with the knowledge about the universal Kabbalah that I put into my book, Kabbalah Runes, explaining how the Kabbalah interprets sound in its semantic, sonic, mystical framework, and talks about the creation of the universe through sound. Well, so do the runes with Odin. The Asatru faith knows this. Odin is the creator, the All-Father who creates the world through the runes. And the Druids know this. We know this because the Ogham is the speaking into the world through the sounds, which are symbolized by trees. Each tree is a different sound. So, and in the Sanskrit Vedic mysticism, the Upanishads, the Vedas, they also use sonic mysticism to explain how Brahma creates the world through speech, who is personified as a separate goddess Vak, who's embodied as Sarasvati, Brahma's consort. So, it all adds up. And I've explained all this in my commentary on the Quran, because the Quran is coming from the same ultimate wisdom place as the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Druid writings, the Jewish Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Genesis, the Book of Enoch, books of Enoch, and so on. Anyway, it's a feast. So it's a feast of comparative spirituality, my commentary on the Quran, intended for a universal age, which is old enough now to actually be given access to this wisdom. I've released, like the metaphysical equivalent of knowledge of nuclear energy. It's up to you guys to use it wisely for peace, because there are forces out there that are misusing this knowledge and misusing it for violence, hatred, nationalism, and collective egotism. I mean, religion in its vulgar form is just collective egotism. I'm in this tribe, I'm against those. That's the crusading mentality. That's the kind of vulgar Zionist mentality that says, we've come home, it's our land, let's kick the Palestinians out, Or it's the Islamic terrorists that says, no, we hate the Jews, kick them out, let's bomb them. They're all vulgar exotericists. My Quran commentary explains what we're supposed to be doing, which is finding the common core universal wisdom in the universal Kabbalah of all gnosis. It's inside us all, and it's inside every sacred text, like a fractal system. And I've explained in detail for 10 years project how it's inside the Quran. Enjoy it, listen to it, get your mind blown. Certainly mine has been many times doing the commentary. And I've gone into the Arabic, I've gone into the Aramaic, I've made specific links with Hebrew and going back to ancient Phoenician. I mean, the word Navim, or the prophet, is actually from the god Nebo, who was the Semitic god of learning and scribes. Nebo, or Nebu, who was the deity of learning in Babylon. You know, I'm a priest of Nebo in this capacity as a scholar, as are we all. Anyone with a PhD who's bothered to get one, it's very hard, is a priest of Nebo, actually, and his wife Tashmetu. So look, hello. That's what I've been up to. The other thing I want to report on before I start my film show is I've also been active with the Delphic Council this week. That's very important ongoing work to bring back the Delphic Games. You know, Delphi is one of the holiest places on the planet. By tradition, it's the centre of the earth. It's where Apollo held his Pythian or Delphic Games for 1,000 years. The intellectuals, the artists, the cultural figures, the poets all came to Delphi and did their performance, and we want to restart that. It was restarted in 1994. Its Secretary General is in Berlin. It's a worldwide movement. I'm their educational director, and if you're an artist, a poet, a painter, a theatre performer, we want to hear from you. Get in touch with me, and we will replan the next Delphic International Games. And then finally, I want to just say that I'm also organising a panel for a conference in Calcutta, which will be online, on the October the 9th with my friend Dr. Chattopadhyaya, and we're going to have a conference on peace and philosophy, and anyone that wants to come and listen, just ask me. Again, it's for like trying to think through the problems of the world intellectually. How can we solve them? Everyone's got some part of the jigsaw puzzle, so let's come together and work on this together. Right, without more ado, I'm going to show my film. I'm going to do a commentary on it, which I believe you'll be able to hear. Now, this is a series of photographs I've taken over the last years of my travels for world peace. I've been to about 35 countries in the world, and I'm starting with Troy, because Troy, this is a shot from the hill at Troy. Now Troy is on the very cusp of the edge between the Aegean Sea and the narrow strait that goes up the Hellespont up to the Black Sea. And it's a strategically important location. And Homer talks about the battle that went on there. Now, I was very fortunate to go there as a pilgrim and a poet, and I shot these photographs, which I'm going to be sharing with you. Sorry, there's a slight technical problem. So these are the walls at Troy. You can see, and it was a beautiful sunny day when I was there. It's surrounded by olive groves, and it just had a most magical feeling. I walked around the ruins, transported back. Here's a wall that's in fairly good condition. You can see from the, the stones. And then I spent many hours walking around. A lot of the finds of Troy have made their way to Istanbul, to the Great Archaeological Museum, which is in the centre of the old city of Istanbul, which I spent a whole day in. And they have all the things of value that were found here, or a lot of them. And it's an absolutely extraordinary place. I strongly recommend it to people. That's a nice view of the far distance. I tried to get a shot where you can see the sea. I think probably in the distance you can see the sea. And it's on a hill, obviously. It's called Hisarlik, the site. It was just rediscovered by Schliemann, who was a great German archaeologist. He was also a friend of Prime Minister Gladstone. He came to London after the discovery. And it was really just his strong intuition that it was here in this mound of Hisarlik. And he found tremendous treasures and amazing things here. And when he came to London, Gladstone organised a lecture, I think at the Athenaeum, which he gave, and Gladstone introduced it. Now, Gladstone was, I think, the most learned Prime Minister the United Kingdom's ever had, technically speaking, and also morally speaking. He was profoundly committed to linking ethics and foreign policy. As Robin Cook, our long-lamented Labour Scottish Foreign Secretary, also believed. We can't, as a country, afford to have a sort of cavalier attitude to foreign policy, just self-interest. And I'm afraid that Boris Johnson, Brexit lot, have utterly let the team down. I attended the Lib Dem National Conference, which took place over the last few days, and got some of the debates. And, you know, they keep the flag of Gladstonian liberalism flying, but I think they ought to really do a peace treaty with all the other progressive parties in Britain, Plaid Cymru, the SNP, the Labour Party, and work out a strategic way of getting rid of the really unimaginably stupid and immoral Conservative government that's taken over. So anyway, Schliemann is turning in his grave at what's happened. Here's a nice shot of some digs. There's me in the shadow taking the photograph. I think I have my cloak, my druid cloak on. You can see it in some of these shots. Looking down at this. And Manfred Korner, I believe he's called, is a great German archaeologist who did most of the recent digging here. He was from a German university. He came to Troy and he stayed there 30 years, and he upgraded our knowledge of all the different levels. All the different levels are given numbers, like Troy 1 is the oldest, Troy 2, Troy 3, because this site has been built on since about 3000, 2000 BC, since the early Bronze Age. And it just started as a village, and then it became more important. It became a much larger compound in the city. And so the unpiecing of all those layers is what Manfred did. Here's Troy 2. This shows you, okay, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because that shows you what they think the gate looked like as you were coming up to Troy 2. Can you imagine walking in there and saying, hello, I'm a visiting druid, I've just come from the end of the earth, and can you give me a bed for the night? Well, they would have said yes, of course. Here's the time frame. So Troy 1 starts in about 3000. Troy 2 kicks in about 2500. Troy 3, Troy 4, Troy 5. When was the Homer epic? When was that set? Well, they think it's around about here, 1250-ish. Troy 6, and then Troy 7. It's somewhere in there. There is evidence of a conquest and burning. It was later called Ilion or Ilium. The name was changed. And, it survived its destruction. They rebuilt parts of it. They lived there. And then it lived on under the Romans. The Romans, built a theatre there, and it was lived in. So the whole thing is absolutely amazing. If you ever get a chance to go to Troy, it's worth a visit. I did an audio tour going around. There's my image with the cloak looking down one of the streets that has survived. When I was a child, I wanted to be an archaeologist, and anyone that came to our house in Brighton and said to the youngest child of the family, Thomas, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would say an archaeologist. I still am an archaeologist. I haven't had time to do any actual digging, apart from I helped with a dig in Cornwall once, digging up a Celtic prince's place near Fowey. But I'm an archaeologist of ideas. I'm a historian of the soul, an archaeologist of the soul. And I think archaeology is incredibly important. What interests me about Troy is the impact that Homer's poetry and the events of Troy had on European history and culture, and our soul, if you want. And that, as a historian of ideas, that's what's so important to me. Right, okay, there's a really good picture that shows you all the different layers starting with Troy 1 down here, which they've dug into Troy 2, and then it obviously each successive layer built on the next layer until you get up here, Troy 6, Troy 7, and this is probably the Troy that Priam was king over, and that Paris captured, his love Helen and brought her back to, and the trouble all kicked off. If you haven't seen the movie with Brad Pitt as Achilles, it's worth seeing. It's a very cleverly done reconstruction of what may well have happened. The Greek ships beach on the shore, and a war ensues for 10 years. And Troy is so well defended they can't get in, except finally in the 10th year, a ruse by Odysseus, who was a devotee of Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Finally they get inside. But the Trojans escape, some of them, and they go off and found the city of Rome. Aeneas escapes. So it was always part of the myth of Rome that Trojans escape and found Rome. And that's why Virgil wrote his sequel to the epics of Homer, the Aeneid, about Aeneas's wanderings, and that too is part of European literature. So if you haven't read Homer and Aeneas, you're not really very well versed in European literature or religion, because for these people, for thousands of years, the gods and the pantheon that are invoked by Homer and Virgil are the deities that govern the affairs of European souls and our culture. And you also need to read the Homeric hymns and the other great writings, the Orphic hymns and so on. Now, as a Druid, this interests me a lot, because when Troy was founded, so were the sacred sites of Britain. Avebury and Stonehenge are, from about the same age. There were Druids at the sacred sites of Britain who would have been going, I reckon, on pilgrimage sometimes as far as Troy and Turkey. We know that some Celtic tribes got to Turkey, the Galatians in fact, and they were still around at the time of St. Paul, because St. Paul went and converted them, somewhat reluctantly, to Christianity. He had to write them a stern letter ticking them off because they were going back to their old ways. But and interestingly, it was those Celts that founded Ankara, which is the capital now of Turkey. Ankara was a Celtic foundation. So all the way off in Anatolia or Asia Minor, the Druids were wandering about. And yes, of course they would have known about what was going on in Britannia. We should never underestimate the internationalism of ancient peoples. And so in my Encyclopedia of Druid Studies, which I'm the first guy in world history to ever bother writing, I've gone into all this, the European dimension of Druidry, because a lot of my friends in Obod and other Druid orders in Britain are a bit insular. They think Druidry is a sort of British thing. Well, no, it's not. It was an Irish, a Welsh, a Scottish, a Gallic, there were Druids in Switzerland, in Galicia, in northern Spain, in Portugal. Lisbon was a Celtic foundation as well. So was Zurich and Geneva. Switzerland is a Druid country. And in its internationalism and its neutrality, I think it's upholding Druid wisdom traditions. Jung knew all this. Jung was like a modern-day Druid in his tower at Bollingdon, writing his red book and his magical alchemical herb and so on. He's always dreaming about Druids. And so my Encyclopedia of Druid Studies has gone into all the European and international dimension of Druidry. And as I say, it stretched as far as Troy. So that's what interests me. Why didn't a wandering Druid pass by and try and mediate this conflict? Because here is